Hello everyone, my name is Jing, a PhD student in Kyungpook National University in South Korea. I'm so appreciate you giving me this opportunity to present here. I'm going to talk about exploring the neuroscience-based narrative curriculum unit development plan, focusing on Chinese as a foreign language curriculum. I have divided my presentation into the following main areas. Firstly, I'm going to look at the introduction. Secondly, I'm moving to the background of discussion, and then I'll move on to introduce a neuroscience-based narrative curriculum unit development plan. Finally, I will focus on the conclusions. First, I will give a brief overview of the current situation about neuroscience curriculum and narrative. Curriculum as a field of study has development in tandem with human society's educational activities. Brain neuroscience has enabled numerous structural and functional improvements and innovations in the field of curriculum, educational methods, and educational learning in recent years. Neuroscience can objectively present a process of brain changes during student learning, which facilitates the exploration of interaction between students' external learning behaviors and internal brain mechanisms and provides a pedagogical foundation for educational reform. About neuroscience and narrative. Narrative is essential to the operation of language and thought. The work of invoking and reshaping the reader's sense of time through the temporal structure and telling of stories is accomplished through the enactment and manipulation of various embodied cognitive processes, both synchronous and asynchronous, that also characterize the neural functioning of time. The power of narrative to promote interpersonal understanding, ethical behavior, and social justice is cognizant on the ability of stories to order the brain-based pattern formation processes through which we develop an understanding of other embodied concepts with which we share the world. As common elements of curriculum and educational processes, teachers, students, materials, and environments can be reconceived at the curriculum level through narrative or narrative thinking. Therefore, we wish to investigate whether narrative curriculum can be made more effective and efficient through the incorporation of neuroscience theories and techniques. So, in order to enhance the language learning effectiveness and the communicative competence of learners of Chinese as a foreign language, the purpose of this study is to investigate the feasibilities of developing a neuroscience-based narrative curriculum unit development plan centered on teaching Chinese as a foreign language. Taking into account the lack of strength in both unit development and the neuroscience-related research in the field of teaching Chinese as a foreign language, the goal of this study is to investigate the potentials and the solutions of developing narrative curriculum units based on brain neuroscience, investigate the causes of a problem, and propose novel approaches to advance the growth of CFL education. So there are three research questions. First, what might the potential of a narrative curriculum grounded in neuroscience look like in terms of enhancing language learning? Second, how can the development of units in Chinese language curriculums be informed by a neuroscience-based narrative curriculum? Finally, how can we develop new approaches to teach Chinese by using a narrative curriculum grounded in neuroscience? Now, I'd like to turn to part 2, background of discussion. In that part, I'm trying to make the point here. Firstly is neural principles of brain learning. First, it is neuroplasticity. Each of the 100 billion neurons in human brain is linked to at least 10,000 others. There are 4 lobes in the human brain: the frontal, temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes. The human brain is neuroplastic, meaning it is constantly molding and changing to accommodate new information and experience. Because of neuroplasticity, the brain can form new synapses whenever new information is taken. When it occurs, physiological changes take place in the brain, which can be thought of an update to the hardware required to process the higher level of thought. To put it plainly, this is a learning experience. Second, we pick and choose what we take in as a part of the learning process. The average person's brain is constantly being fed data from the body's sensory receptors, but it only receives about 1% of this data. The reticular activating system, a network of nerves in the dorsal part of our brainstem and that regulates arousal and attention, is responsible for filtering out noise and let through relevant data. The brain selects the top 1% of information. Brain imaging studies confirm that the RAS is particularly attuned to information about the environment that signals novelty and curiosity about the pleasurable experience. The third way the brain simplifies its processing of information is through the use of patterns. The brain sends out stronger and more extended memory circuits when new learning recognizes the context in which it is surrounded by existing circuits, or when learning using multiple senses such as visual and auditory connected to multiple circuits. In this process, the brain's internal sensory organs pick up on and remember only a subset of the data because it has been assigned meaning. This meaning assigned data then goes on to form a wide range of sensory and instantaneous memories. Stories are the foundation upon which humans build their understandings of the world. When information is well understood and is stored in the form of story, a human brain is better able to retain it. So it could be argued that helping students by giving them information in patterns that help them recognize meaningful information is crucial in enhancing their learning. Fourth, the brain engages in extensive processing when storing information for the long term. Long-term memory is a product of successful learning. It is the brain's capacity to remember the information acquired through the experience and apply it effectively at a later time. There are 3 types of long-term memory that all contribute to how well a person learns: declarative memory, procedural memory, and affective memory. Individual differences in the brain structure of function go hand in hand with differences in how people learn. However, we can use evidence from the brain neuroscience to design individualized programs to help students rewire their brains for better learning. Now I'll move on to the neurophysiology of language processing. The human brain's nervous system is complex hierarchical system, and the process of language acquisition requires the interaction of various brain regions to facilitate the development of language and thought. Language processing can be divided into aspects: language comprehension and language output. In terms of language comprehension, a speaker's words are continuously transmitted in the form of sound to the listener. Each of these steps involves complex processes, so it is possible to say that language comprehension comprises multiple stages, including speech perception, synaptic processing, and semantic processing. First, there are three stages of speech processing in language acquisition: acoustic, phonological analysis, and phonemic processing, and lecture recognition. Acoustic analysis is the first stage of speech perception, and it refers to the listener's ability to differentiate between distinct speech sounds based on their characteristics. Phonemic processing refers to the identification of phonemes based on the previous analysis of phonological features. Acoustic phonological analysis, and phonetic processing are pre-lecture stages and processing. The perception of audiovisual speech may also depend on the premotor and motor cortex, which are more active for audiovisual speech than for separately present auditory and visual speech tracts. Second, understanding the syntactic relationships between words can aid in understanding the meaning of complex structures. Broca's area, the posterior temporal lobe and the anterior temporal lobe have all been implicated in syntactic processing. Third, the brain's perceptual and motor experience of concepts characterize semantic processing in neuroscience research. Functional magnetic resonance imaging shows that in addition to the auditory and visual areas remained above, there are also regions of activation of emotional knowledge located in the anterior temporal lobe and the anterior and middle frontal lobes and the cingulate area, which act as switchboard for processing information. Therefore, this study is going to examine from a neuroscience perspective how unit development in narrative curriculum can aid in the acquisition of Chinese as a second or foreign language. Now we are talking about the narrative curriculum. With the first point, we can identify the following three features of narrative. First, narrative cognition, which is a way of thinking that employs stories. The focus of narrative cognition is on how past experience, current circumstances, and anticipated future outcomes all work together to shape human behavior. Narrative cognition allowed us to make sense of the fleeting but structured coherence of our own contextualized stories. Second, narrative is a tool for meaning-making in the classroom. When designing a curriculum, it's important to think about the wide range of contexts in which students will apply what they learn. In this regard, the connection between the story and the curriculum is fundamental. Depending on what is emphasized, different people will arrive at different conclusions about what a narrative curriculum means. Third, by using narratives, students can take charge of their own education and truly internalize what they were learned. In other words, it's a method by which students graduate from their own values in the cultural world through the incorporation of what they are learned into personal narratives. Since the configurational activity of narrative span three imitative circuits and can shape and reshape the processes underlying embodied cognition. Stories have the power to pattern and repeat our brains because of the mutual influence of genetic functions and anatomical structures in the brain and culturally variable communication and educational experience. We can conclude that the narrative process is a biological cultural hybrid. In the context of curriculum development, the learner's capacity for meaning-making stands at the guiding principle of narrative as a tool. The narrative curriculum proposed by Lorenzen and Jing used the unified learning through stories option as the primary focus of this discussion because it is the only narrative curriculum composition option that explicitly incorporates the learner's meaning-making process. They argue that narrative serves a constructivist mediator, ensuring that students arrive at their own unique interpretations of the material. Narrative plays a significant role in the process by which students construct meaning about the world by making logical connections between knowledge, dialogue, and experience. Lorenzen and Jing propose a narrative planning template and argue that narrative curriculum may play a significant role in educational reform. Educational content, learner aspects, and social aspects are three types of content elements thought from the narrative practice tradition and incorporated into this planning template. They argue that narrative education plan offers a more organic and consistent learning environment for students, and they proposed a five-step narrative planning process. Narrative is a jumping off point. Student-generated meaning outcome-focused instruction and methodical preparation are all hallmarks of this planning process. For this reason, its model breaks down into three sections depicted in Fig. 1. Goals, context, and learning theory. The narrative curriculum is based on a cognitive theory that emphasizes the importance of constructing one's own meaning and reality instead of discovering the teacher's reality. Knowledge is actively constructed by the learner, not passively accepted or given by the external environment, and the process is a dynamic and balanced open system of experience and knowledge expansion through breakthrough, its adaptation, and then debugging. According to constructivism, in the following sections, we will investigate the relationship between neuroscience and the narrative curriculum and the possibilities of a neuroscience-based narrative curriculum. As was previously mentioned, constructivist philosophy underlines the development of narrative curriculum planning. Neuroscience provides an insight into the neurobasic of constructivist narrative pedagogy. The HPA axis is the primary process involved in constructivism. However, the HPA axis is activated in a direct fashion by the hypothalamic paraventricular nucleus. The activity of the HPA axis may also be regulated by cytokines, negative feedback mechanisms, and glucose hypothalamic circuits. The first is the cognitive construction of normal synaptic formation and stability. The second is the cognitive construction of network of multi-synaptic connections. The third is cognitive construction of multi-layered, multi-synaptic networks of sketchy situations. And the fourth is the subjectivization of these constructivist dimensions for synaptic connections. Now, I'd like to turn to the possibilities of neuroscience-based narrative curriculum. We will investigate the feasibility of developing a narrative curriculum based on findings from brain neuroscience. We have argued that if a person is having trouble remembering what they have learned, it may be because they are not making connections between what they are learning and what they already know or how it applies to their lives. Furthermore, there is a connection between the neurological evidence of constructivism and the learner's neuroplasticity during the learning process. Recognizing patterns in information and reinforcing patterns through connections between neurons can be thought of as the process by which learners link new knowledge to old knowledge in a particular contextual vein, and constructivism is at the heart of narrative curriculum. It aims to supply and support the curriculum's purpose based on the purpose set forth in the educational syllabus, so that educators can contemplate that makes the curriculum meaningful and students can work together to create opportunities for meaningful learning. And a neuroscientific foundation for learning, a neuroscientific foundation for language processing, and a neuroscientific foundation for constructivism are all required to propel this process forward. Accordingly, in light of the evidence presented above, we are of the opinion that a narrative curriculum with a foundation in a neuroscience possesses the potential to put into practice. Now, I'll move on to the part 3, a neuroscience-based narrative curriculum unit development plan. In this part, we'll talk about the unit development steps for neuroscience-based narrative curriculum first. A unit is the culmination of a curriculum's organizational structure, constitute a developing learning content and experience, incorporating evidence about the neuroscience of brain learning into each step of narrative curriculum planning process. As we design our curriculum can therefore assist students in activating their brains more effectively and enhancing their learning. As visual unit development be approached, the user planning templates will facilitate the development of narrative curriculum. Lorenzen and Jing argued that narrative curriculum provides a natural continuous learning environment for students, and they proposed a 5-step narrative planning process as shown in Fig 2. The planning template illustrates the theoretical organization of the curriculum and Narrative curriculum's guiding principles. The Figure 2 is the narrative curriculum planning template designed by Lorenzen and Jing. The following three processes for developing curriculum units emerge when narrative curriculum is combined with brain neuroscience. The first step is to devise a goal that is compatible with the brain. The brain is goal-directed. Long-term memory is the capacity of the brain to store newly formed information in the form of neural connections and neural networks for efficient retrieval and application at a later date. Long-term memory, on the other hand, is comprised of information noticed by the brain's internal sensory organs and retained by assigning it meaning. Therefore, we should consider developing learning objectives relevant to students and combining new information with prior experience to produce new meanings, thereby enhancing students' learning and memory. The second step is to create assessments which are neurologically. As educators, we must remember that there are numerous types of assessment that can be administered in ways that are beneficial to brains of students. Engage students in this problem-solving process throughout the assessment process and maintain ongoing record and dynamic observation throughout. During the access process, stimulate the production of dopamine in the learner's brain and eliminate negative attitudes toward assessment. The third step is to provide an educational experience that is neurologically. When new information enters the hippocampus, the brain searches existing memory for related or similar information. Then we must use our various senses to learn, thereby stimulating synaptic connections and the formation of mind-line sheaths. In addition, a learning network of past, present, and future must be established to facilitate the connection of new and old knowledge and the creation of meaning through the interaction of old and new knowledge, thereby facilitating the transition from short-term to long-term memory. And then we should a neuroscience-based narrative curriculum unit development plan in Chinese as a foreign language curriculum. Learning Chinese as a second language is a cognitive activity ultimately controlled by one's brain. Knowledge of language, the development of linguistic competence, and the formation of linguistic competency all depend on contribute to changes in the brain. For the goal of this proposal, we use Unit 3, Colorful Society from HSK Standard Course 6 Book 1, published by Beijing Language and Culture University Press, and add the unit development content for a neuroscience-based narrative curriculum. The main goal of the unit Colorful Society is for students to develop their ability to think critically and communicate effectively across cultural boundaries, to learn independently and in groups, to think and work through the unit target language, to have more meaningful conversations about important topics in life and society, and to create their own multicultural communities. In this step, curriculum designers must select learning outcomes that are compatible with the neural mechanisms underlying language comprehension and production. Here, as you can see, the narrative curriculum plan for the day I didn't use my phone lessons is depicted in Fig 3.1 and Fig 3.2. Here is the narrative curriculum plan for Chinese cuisine in globalization lessons is shown in Fig 4.1, Fig 4.2. And here is the narrative curriculum plan for We All Love White Noise. Lesson is shown in Fig 5.1, Fig 5.2. Alright, we come to the next point, which is concepts and assessment methods for the narrative curriculum unit development. The concept and assessment methods for the narrative curriculum unit development will be introduced in this section as we planned in 3.2. Colorful Society will serve as the unit overarching theme for students to focus their studies on. Colorful Society introduces students to the culture of target language while drawing parallels to the students' own lives and experience. Using a multifaceted approach that incorporates narrative instruction, brain research, and language processing, we help students acquire and commit to memory the knowledge and abilities they need to succeed in the modern world. In line with neuroscientific evidence, we use narrative to guide students from low to high dimensional constructs that activate the hypothalamic, the HPA axis during the learning processes. Learners can activate relational memory by repeatedly asking the generating questions that are personally relevant to them during the exploration process and then proposing new hypotheses. Inquiry questions require the extensive reading of the story in search of questions that are both engaging and relevant to the students' lives. In addition, it helps students think and express in the target language, which is in turn stimulate and improve the brain's functions in language processing, and it allows students to generate certain positive emotions through the output of the target language, which in turn positively contributes to the brain's learning memory. So we need more neurological tests, as we talked. Avoid tests that might make students feel bad. Facilitate positive feelings about the assessment by increasing dopamine release in the student's brain. Students are encouraged to think critically about their own learning as they participated in the evaluation process. In conclusion, let me sum up my main points here. The narrative curriculum places an emphasis on how newly acquired information is woven into existing frameworks of understanding. When we learn a new language, on the other hand, our ability to produce language depends on our brain's ability to process the semantics of that language before we use it to communicate. Learning a language can be seen cognitive and constructivist process of meaning construction. In the first phase of narrative curriculum, when establish fundamental goals, it is important to take into account source of goals that met those that can enhance students' capacity for problem solving, critical and creative thinking, independent study, and group work. The next step is an instructional process that uses inquiry and exploration to delve into stories. Next, in all structure to help students make connections to their own experience, foster the kind of thinking that leads to the creation of novel meanings, and have teachers serve as scaffolds for their students' language production and the acquisition of new linguistic knowledge. And this study findings will help in three ways. First, by providing specific solutions and methods for developing narrative curriculum units, and thereby promoting the improvement and enhancement of foreign Chinese education. Second, by providing new research perspectives and research methods for foreign Chinese education research, and thereby promoting the development and innovating of foreign Chinese education. And third, by providing new application areas for the intersynaptic transfer of knowledge. This study has limitation that the implementation study should confirm and verify the validity of the unit development. Thus, there is a pressing need for further investigation into the intersection of educational knowledge and neurolinguistics, specifically in the area of neurolinguistics-based foreign language learning, in order to better understand how to apply and implement neuroscience-based educational curriculum and methods. More neuroscience-based educational empirical studies are needed to confirm the approach's viability. Thank you for listening.